the moment you've all been waiting for. We're back. Welcome to season 2 of I'll Tell You What, the podcast that's all love Black history. I'll Tell You What, it's presented by Who I Do, and I'm Ashley, your favorite raconteuse that tells you these love stories every single Monday. So don't forget to subscribe on the Tube of You or wherever you get your podcasts. Please follow us everywhere you are. Head to I'llTellYouWhat.com if you want to leave a comment or a question, or if you want to become an official Owl Runner, you can join our Patreon. That's right. I'll Tell You What did a lot during our little 6 or 7 week break, but y'all, it feels so good to be back. So let's talk about the person I can't wait to tell you all about this week. Before there was Dr. Umar, there was Marcus Garvey. The Jamaican-born nationalist sought to economically uplift the people of African descent and ultimately pave a way for us to return back to the motherland. He's known for founding the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, an organization that was created to improve the lives of Black people. He created the Black Star Line, which was a logistics company that was intended to ship goods and transport Black people to and from the Americas and Africa and beyond. He created and wrote many publications advocating for racial independence and ultimately the betterment of our people. And yet he was a very controversial figure even amongst our own people. He had beef with W.E.B. Du Bois and the NAACP. He worked with a recruiter for the Ku Klux Klan. Yes, naysayer, you heard me right. And yet his legacy has inspired so many, even to this day. However, his success and impact would not have been nearly as large as it was if it weren't for the 2 women in his life, Amy Ashwood Garvey and Amy Jacques Garvey. Their contributions should be acknowledged too. And soon, you're going to see how Marcus's romantic life was interwoven into the fabric that made him the legend that he's known for today. So first, we must begin with Marcus's love story with his first wife, Amy Ashwood. So after an enlightened trip to Europe, Marcus Garvey returned to Jamaica in 1914 and met the person that would become his wife. He was attending a debate at Westwood High School where he was captivated by a 17-year-old activist who, quote, gave a powerful political speech on Pan-Africanism. The activist was Amy Ashwood. Marcus showed interest immediately, and it seemed to have been reciprocated. Despite a 10-year age difference, they began to date. Now, through their relationship and dedication to all things related to the African diaspora, they together created the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Amy became, quote, the first secretary and a member of the board, as Marcus became the face of the organization. About 2 years into their relationship, Marcus and Amy got engaged. However, this was something they kept to themselves as her parents did not approve of their relationship. In their eyes, Marcus was a bum. He didn't have steady employment or funds, so essentially he was a broke boy. They sent Amy to Panama, quote, to get her away from Marcus and his influence, but anyone with good sense knows that would only drive them closer. Through their courtship, they wrote each other letters. Marcus referred to her as Josephine, and she would call him her Napoleon. Their engagement would drag on 4 years, though. Amy would return from Panama and would join him in New York in September 1918. And eventually, their plans to move forward with their wedding were in motion, but then something disastrous happened, and that almost ended the entire ordeal. So, the wedding to Marcus Garvey and his fiancée, Amy Ashwood, almost didn't happen. And that's because of what happened in October 1919. So at that point, Marcus was known for his work in his organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA. Under UNIA, they had a weekly newspaper called The Negro World, a building in Harlem called Liberty Hall, and incorporated the Black Star Line, which was the organization's transport boat line. Marcus was a target to many, especially within local and federal government. So in October 1919, George Tyler, an alleged shareholder of the UNIA, barges into the office, pushes Amy aside, and, quote, used a .38 caliber pistol to fire multiple rounds at Marcus. Now, I don't know about you, but think about somebody you know that has been in the longest relationship, and one day you're thinking they're going to get married, right? Maybe it's somebody you follow on Instagram. Maybe it's somebody that you know, maybe you went to high school with, and they've been engaged for like 10 years, or at least in your mind. To you, it feels like a long time, but to the person that's actually in that long relationship, it's even longer for them. So I imagine Amy had super saiyan strength that just took over, because at that point, she throws herself in between George and Marcus in an attempt to protect her man. George fires again, and Amy, quote, finally managed to tackle him down the stairs, at which point the police had arrived and arrested Tyler. She said, not today and not tomorrow, neither. All right? Finally, out of harm's way, or at least temporarily, Marcus and Amy got married, quote, in a private Catholic church ceremony. On Christmas of 1919, they had a large public wedding with over 3,000 guests. Marcus and Amy celebrated with their friends and fellow UNIA members in what was a happy time. But sadly, it would all come to an end, because in 1922, the same year he was arrested for mail fraud, Amy allegedly caught Marcus cheating on her with none other than her best friend and maid of honor, Amy Jacques. So Marcus Garvey allegedly cheated on his first wife, Amy Ashwood, with her maid of honor, a woman named Amy Jacques. After Amy A found out, she went to England while Marcus continued to engage in relations with Amy J, again, allegedly. It was also then in 1922 that Marcus and Amy A's marriage officially came to an end. And a month later, on July 27th, 1922, he married Amy J in Baltimore. Now, Amy J's relationship with Marcus began on a professional level. She moved to the United States in 1917, and by 1920 became his personal secretary and traveling companion. One would assume that through spending so much time together, a relationship and possibly a romance would form despite her friendship to his wife. Author Judith Stein made an assumption that might speak to why Marcus's marriage to Amy A failed. Quote, Amy Jacques chose to invest her strengths and talents in her husband's career. She defined her role as Garvey's comforter and surrogate, whereas Amy Ashwood viewed herself more as an equal. Amy A, on the other hand, wrote that, quote, at least one of her reasons for leaving Marcus Garvey had been her desire to help Afro-American women to find themselves and rise in life. So essentially, she was about the work, and the work of the betterment of all people, including women. You know, some men really, at that time, and even now, could not deal. But alas, when Marcus filed for divorce, Amy A tried to counter it, denying that their marriage had come to an end. However, her countersuit was thrown out. His marriage to Amy Jacques became the more notable marriage of his when historians recall his life. While Marcus was incarcerated, Amy J, quote, tried constantly to secure a pardon on his behalf, appealing to multiple governments, but to no avail. She also continued the work of the UNIA and defended him in many print pieces, as many were starting to doubt his motives by the time he was locked up. She kept the organization going by wearing many different hats while also making sure to visit him in Atlanta at least once a month. Quote, it is virtually impossible to measure the amount of work that Amy accomplished during this period. And yet, Marcus allegedly didn't show any gratitude towards her. Marcus Garvey was incarcerated for mail fraud around how he advertised the Black Star Line. His wife Amy continued to keep his organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, afloat. Gender and society writer Karen S. Adler wrote, quote, in addition to speaking all over the country to raise money for Marcus's defense fund, Amy met constantly with officials and UNIA officers, organized UNIA conferences and affairs, was associate editor of the Negro World and editor of its Woman's Page, worked tirelessly with lawyers to get Marcus released from jail, compiled and published Volume 2 of the Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, and visited Marcus almost every 3 weeks in Atlanta from New York. And yet, her work went unrecognized by him. Once he was released, he was exiled to Jamaica, where Amy joined him. But Marcus was not content in Jamaica, so he went to England. Amy, again, joined him. His life post-incarceration also allowed them to create 2 boys, but their marriage lacked true intimacy. Years after his death, Amy Jacques told Ebony magazine in 1971 that, quote, Marcus Garvey never married me for love. No, sir. That was not the proposal. He needed me. That was all. He needed someone he could trust. Even though she was aware of the reality of their marriage, Amy wrote in her Woman's Page about deadbeat, broke, good-for-nothing, son-of-a-gun type of men. But quiet as it's kept, the men she were describing as no good were essentially her husband. But not really sure if the majority of readers were aware of that at the time. But Marcus did not care, or rather, it wasn't that he didn't care, but the work was more important, or at least that's what he told himself. As he got older, he struggled to find relevancy among other political leaders and activists. He decided in 1935 he would move to London. Now, Amy didn't want to go, partially because one of their boys was really, really sick, but about 2 years later, she would move out there with their children. But briefly, they lived out there for about a year before the 3 of them moved back to Jamaica while Marcus remained in London. According to his biography by Stephen Johnson, when Amy left London, quote, Marcus failed to maintain communication with his wife. He kept a relationship of some sort with his sons and continued to send them money. But 2 years after their departure, Marcus actually passed away. After his death, Amy continued her work as a feminist and a Black nationalist. She wrote probably one of her greatest works, Garvey and Garveyism, in the late 1950s, and it was published in 1963. And despite their failed marriage, she essentially continued his legacy through the book and her work overall. And that, all runners, concludes the love stories of Marcus Garvey. So what did you think about Marcus Garvey's love story? And did you know any of this and how it was interwoven into his legacy that you are aware of? Now, if you want to learn more about Marcus Garvey, I've included all of the articles and books that I read in this week's research on I'llTellYouWhat.com. Oh, and all runners, don't forget to subscribe to the Tube if you did not do so. Follow us everywhere and join our Patreon and become an official All Runner. And of course, come back next week for another Black History love story. See you in the pews.